Good afternoon, everybody. It's Valerie Ling, clinical psychologist, founder director of the Center for Effective Living, joining you live today. And we've come full circle, and I'm back to all things parenting today. So I'm organizing my live streams according to categories, and today's category is one on parenting. So I had put out a post just to welcome any questions. What would you like to see me talk about? And I did have one question come in, and that had to do with adult children. So I'm going to return to that post just so I make sure that I'm actually answering the question. And if you are there watching, let me know, and also feel free to continue the conversation as I'm speaking. You might have some questions coming up as well. I'm trying to actually share this to the clinic page, but I think which is where the question was asked, but I can't seem to do that. All right, how well can I actually ramble while I'm trying to fix this? I'm off site today, so if you've come into the practice, you will know that the other psychologists pretty much stay at our main site at Westleigh, and I actually travel out to a few different places to provide a mobile, well, I like to call it a resiliency clinic, to various institutions and organizations that have a tendency for high burnout, and I come out and actually run some clinics on site. Okay, I think I have effectively shared the page now. So let me go back to the question, and which I think it was about, I'm just coming to it. How do you motivate a young adult? Just go to it. I'm actually looking at it now. How do you motivate, encourage, or inspire a young adult to get motivated enough to try something, especially when they don't know what they want to pursue yet? Okay, that's a great question, and I think it just highlights that you never stop being a parent. So, you know, the concerns that we have when they're little and they can't walk and they can't feed themselves don't really go away. They have the same theme. And the same theme that is that when you see your child, you want the best for them. And because we're always a couple of decades ahead of them in terms of experience, we actually continue to see the gap between ourselves and our child with our life experiences and our hopes and our desires and our worries, our fears that maybe they might make mistakes or do the things that you wish you hadn't done. So that tension always remains, regardless, I think, of how old your child is. So the first thing I'm going to say is that what does change, even though that tension remains the same, is our role in resolving that tension, right? So when they're little, you know, ages and stages, when they're before school, toddler age, a lot of that is about you feeding and taking care of them, and responding to their needs immediately, because essentially children, very young children, don't yet have the emotional ability or the problem-solving ability to make decisions for themselves or even to make sense of their world. But when they are in their adult stage, they actually, and by an adult, I guess I'm looking at 18 to 25 as a definition. But when they're in an adult phase of life, the templates that they have actually to make decisions, to emotionally regulate themselves, and to look for their own sources of inspiration are pretty much set there, right? And so as parents, we can't physically activate that for them. In fact, we have to recognize that they're no longer teenagers. And I think there's a confusion now because more and more young adults are actually living at home. But just because they're living at home doesn't mean that they've regressed a stage in their development and they've become teenagers again. They're still very much adults. Okay, so that's the first thing that I'm going to say is we can't resolve the tension, and we need to understand that even if they're living at home, the adult stage of life is actually starting to take ownership of your own goals and aspirations, seeking input from others, seeking help, and taking those steps. So that's the first thing. The second thing I'm going to say is that if they are living at home, then it's difficult to come back into a home environment, or if they've been out and come back, and sort of do that little dance, I suppose, of you're my mum and dad, but I'm an adult. I can cook for myself. I don't want to be home for Sunday night dinners. And I would suggest that the second thing about that is to actually have a very open conversation with your adult child when they're coming in. So it's set up that they're coming back into community living, right? And the community is the family. And there might be certain courtesies that we might want to see, certain contributions that you might want to see, and certainly some privacy for them, and some boundaries on their part as well. So you're actually almost seeing them as an adult who's living at home, but they are part of community. And it just so happens that this is a family community, which leads to my third point. When you do live in community, other people don't clean your room, they don't go through your stuff, and they don't tell you what to do. Okay, and that's really hard for parents, because that dynamic of if you see them very often, if they're living at home, makes us think that we're back in a life stage where they're teenagers or even younger, where we have a lot of input into their lives. So we need to recognize that for adults, a healthy development is for them to individuate, and they may struggle in that a little bit, but we can no longer actually tell them what to do, just as we can no longer motivate them or bring them to things, to fire things up, right? So what can we actually do? Well, the first thing is we can be companionable. They can like hanging around us. We can invite them out to be social, and which sets up a paradigm that they may actually like to invite you out for a coffee. So the first thing is, I guess, you are available, accessible. And when you are in the same space as your adult, in that companionable space, whether you're doing an activity together, you're just listening and you're just being, right? Because they're trying to figure out whether you're going to be able as well to not come into that space and tell them what to do, or, you know, are you going to be the parent? What are you going to be? And I guess the best thing I can say is that when you're in a companionable space with your adult child, you are actually an encourager. So the question was, how do you encourage a young person? You tell them the things that you appreciate about them, you listen intently to their day, you inquire about some of the things that they've been up to, and if they don't want to talk about it, we respect their privacy. Now, if we build that, it's like a bank account of trust and credibility. If we build that, hopefully the second phase of being with your adult child is that they may come to you to ask you the questions. And that's where I often say to my clients with adult children, you are now in a parenting relationship with your child where you are encourager and cheerleader, and sometimes a consultant. I have to stop doing this. I used to have a boss that told me, do you know you have a tendency to do this? Don't do that. Okay. So you are ready and available, and when the questions come, then we need to stop, drop, and attend. Not necessarily by telling them what to do, but inquiring a little bit more. Tell me more. And what you're actually doing is you're facilitating their own thoughts and their own decision making. You're asking them, so what have you thought about? What have you gathered about this? What have you figured out about this? And then you're asking them, so what do you actually really need? Now, when they get to the point that they can articulate what they actually really need, you can then ask, would it be a helpful thing if I shared this with you? Because I went through a similar thing, or I've seen my friends go through a similar thing, and you become a resource person. And when that's set up, more and more of that happens, your adult child recognizes that you're actually someone that they can turn to ask the question and be helpful. It's a helpful thing for them to be making their own decision, coming to their own decision. So the role there is that when they ask, you facilitate the decision making. You help them to identify what's missing. You might sit with them and help them to pen out some goals. You might even offer, would you like me to help you to get to that first point, or do you have someone in mind, right? And I think the other part of the question was, how do you inspire them? Inspiration is a hard thing for all of us, isn't it? Motivation and inspiration. I think inspiration comes from aspiration. It also comes from hard work, doesn't it? The more we do something that we love and the more we do something we're committed to, the more we feel motivated. So I think that as parents of adult children, I say you're the best billboard for them. Yay! Always be the best advertisement for your children, whether they're crawling or whether they're adults going off. Be the best. Is billboard an American phrase? You know what I mean, an advertising thing that people look at. Be the best billboard that you can be through what you do as parents for your leisure, what you do to contribute back to community, what you do for meaning, engagement, what you do for your social life, what you do when you're interacting with them, in the way that you're gentle and polite and inquiring and inquisitive and caring and loving. That's the best I can say for an adult, is as they watch you being an adult, right, they themselves can be inspired and encouraged. So that's what I've got for you today. If you've got any questions now, feel free to type them in. I'll just refresh and just see if there's anything going on with the live stream. And if not, I don't think there is. If I've missed it, I will return to it once I actually get off the live stream. So that's all I have for you today. Thanks for submitting that question. Take care.